The old rusty tractor sat gleaming in the afternoon sun as James Harper watched in disbelief. 3 luxury cars had just pulled into his dusty driveway, and a team of people with cameras were setting up lights around his barn. A woman in an expensive suit extended her hand. "Mr. Harper, we'd like to discuss a partnership opportunity. Since Ms. Valencia's post went viral, your farm has become quite the sensation. We're prepared to offer 6 figures for exclusive rights to." Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Under the scorching summer sun, James Harper wiped sweat from his brow and squinted across his struggling farm. The once fertile fields of Hillcrest Valley had grown patchy and dry, much like his hope for the future. At 42, his weathered face told the story of a man who had spent too many years watching the sky for rain that rarely came in sufficient amounts. The farm had been in the Harper family for 3 generations, passed down from his grandfather to his father, and finally to him. But unlike the previous decades of relative prosperity, James's tenure had coincided with rising costs, changing climate patterns, and relentless competition from industrial agriculture. Each season brought new challenges, and each year, the financial noose tightened a little more around his neck. Today was particularly difficult. The bank had left yet another voicemail about his overdue mortgage payment. The irrigation system had broken down for the 3rd time this month, and his son Alex had just been accepted into an agricultural college that they couldn't afford without taking on even more debt. James ran his calloused fingers through his thinning sandy hair and leaned against the side of Cain. His tractor, a 1970s John Deere that had seen better days, but remained the pride of his modest fleet of equipment. The machine's faded, green paint was chipped in places, revealing patches of rust underneath, but, quote, it still ran when coaxed properly, thanks to James's mechanical skills and stubborn refusal to give up on anything that could still be fixed. "Dad!" Alex called from the direction of the farmhouse, his lanky 17-year-old frame moving quickly across the yard. "There's someone at the gate." James squinted toward the entrance of his property. A sleek silver rental car had pulled up, looking entirely out of place among the dusty surroundings. He hadn't been expecting visitors, and salespeople rarely made it out this far from town. "I'll handle it," James replied, patting his son on the shoulder. "Why don't you finish up with the fence in the north pasture?" Alex nodded and headed off. His shoulders slightly slumped. James knew his son was disappointed that they couldn't afford to fix the old pickup truck that would have been his once he got his license. Another dream deferred by financial reality. As James approached the gate, he saw a young woman step out of the car. She was dressed in what appeared to be expensive casual wear, the kind people wore when they wanted to look effortlessly stylish. Though James suspected there was nothing effortless about it. Large sunglasses covered much of her face, and her dark hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail. She surveyed the farm with an intensity that made James slightly uncomfortable. "Can I help you, miss?" he called out as he approached, trying to keep his tone friendly despite his exhaustion. The woman turned, a bright smile spreading across her face as she removed her sunglasses. "Hi! I'm so sorry to intrude. My name is Isabella Valencia." She extended a manicured hand, which James shook somewhat awkwardly, aware of the dirt under his fingernails and the calluses on his palm. "James Harper," he replied, noting how her accent seemed to place her from somewhere far away from rural Nebraska. "What brings you out to these parts?" Isabella gestured enthusiastically to the landscape around them. "I'm on a cross-country road trip, documenting authentic American experiences. I was driving by and saw your farm from the highway. It's absolutely perfect for what I'm looking for." James raised an eyebrow, not quite understanding. "Perfect for what, exactly?" "Photography," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. "The golden fields, that beautiful old barn, and especially that vintage tractor I spotted. The lighting right now is just magical. I was wondering if I could possibly take a few photos on your property. I'd be more than happy to pay you for your time, of course." James hesitated. The offer of money was tempting given his financial situation, but there was something about this woman that didn't quite align with the typical tourists who occasionally asked to photograph the rural landscape. "What kind of photos are we talking about?" he asked cautiously. Isabella pulled out her phone and quickly scrolled through a series of images. Just artistic shots, like these. She explained, showing him photographs of natural landscapes, rustic buildings, and vintage objects, all professionally shot with what appeared to be filters that enhanced their nostalgic quality. "I'd love to get a few shots with your tractor, if that's possible," she continued. "There's something so authentically American about it." James looked back at his beloved John Deere, sitting stoically in the field. There was no harm in letting someone take a few pictures, especially if she was willing to pay. And truth be told, a small part of him felt a flicker of pride that someone found beauty in the things he worked so hard to maintain. "I suppose that would be all right," he conceded. "How much time do you need?" Isabella beamed. "Just an hour or so, if that's okay? And I'm happy to give you $200 for the trouble." James blinked in surprise. $200 for an hour of letting someone take pictures of his old tractor? That was more than fair. It would cover the part he needed for the irrigation system. "That's generous," he managed, trying not to show how desperately he needed that money. "Great." Isabella clapped her hands together. "Do you mind if I bring my car in? I have a few different outfits I might want to use." James nodded, still slightly bewildered by the turn of events. As he opened the gate to let her drive through, he had no idea that this seemingly random encounter would upend his life in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Isabella efficiently transformed the area around the tractor into what looked like a professional photo shoot. From her car, she produced a small bag of what James assumed were makeup supplies, a tripod for her phone, and what appeared to be very expensive camera equipment. She worked with the precision of someone who had done this many times before, setting up angles and checking lighting conditions with practiced ease. "Do you do this professionally?" James asked, watching her adjust her camera settings. Isabella smiled enigmatically. "In a way, I create content for various platforms. It's a living." She didn't elaborate further, and James didn't press. The digital world where people made money from taking photos and posting them online was far removed from his daily reality of crop yields and equipment maintenance. "Would you mind if I sat on the tractor for a few shots?" she asked, already changing into a simple white sundress that somehow managed to look both casual and expensive. "Go ahead," James replied, reaching over to brush some dust off the seat. "Just be careful with the controls. She's old, but she still runs." Isabella climbed onto the tractor with surprising agility for someone in a dress, positioning herself on the seat with practiced poise. She took several self-portraits with her phone on a timer, adjusting her position slightly between shots. Then she switched to her professional camera, handing James the remote trigger. "Would you mind taking a few for me?" she asked, showing him which button to press. James obliged, feeling increasingly curious about this strange young woman who seemed so at home in front of a camera. As he snapped photos, he found himself surprisingly impressed by how she transformed his ordinary tractor into something almost cinematic, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the scene. After about 40 minutes, Isabella changed back into her original outfit and began packing up her equipment. "Thank you so much, Mr. Harper. These are going to be perfect." "Just James is fine," he corrected, still somewhat bemused by the whole experience. "Glad the old girl could be of service." He patted the tractor affectionately. Isabella pulled out her wallet and handed him 2 crisp $100 bills. "I really appreciate this. Your farm is exactly what I was looking for, authentic, beautiful in its simplicity." James accepted the money with a nod, unsure if he should feel complimented or slightly patronized by her assessment. Before he could decide, she continued, "Oh, and if it's okay with you, I might tag the location when I post some of these. It could bring some attention to your area, good for local tourism and all that." James shrugged. "I doubt many tourists would be interested in a struggling farm, but you're welcome to it. We're Hillcrest Valley Farm, just outside of Mapleton." Isabella smiled that enigmatic smile again. "You'd be surprised what people find interesting these days, James. Authenticity is a rare commodity." As she drove away in her sleek rental car, James stood in the dusty driveway, the $200 clutched in his hand, feeling somehow both significant and insignificant at the same time. He watched until her car disappeared down the road, then turned back to the endless tasks that awaited him, already relegating the strange encounter to the back of his mind as he focused on what needed to be done before bell. Sundown. That evening, after a simple dinner of fried chicken that his daughter Emma had prepared, James sat at the kitchen table examining the farm's accounts. The numbers refused to align in any way that didn't end with a negative balance. Even with the unexpected $200 from the photographer, they were still falling short on next month's mortgage payment. He rubbed his tired eyes and closed the laptop. Emma, 16 and fiercely protective of her family, sat across from him, pretending to do her homework, but actually watching him with concern. "That bad, huh?" she asked quietly. James forced a smile. "Nothing we haven't handled before." Alex entered the kitchen, his hands still dirty from working on the fence. "I saw that fancy car earlier. Who was that?" "Just some photographer who wanted to take pictures with the tractor," James replied, reaching for his mug of new cold coffee. Emma perked up. "Really? Like for a magazine or something?" James shook his head. "I don't think so. She said something about creating content and posting it online." He shrugged. "Paid $200 for the privilege." Alex's eyes widened. $200? Just to take pictures of our old tractor? That's crazy. "Did you get her name?" Emma asked, a strange note in her voice. James thought for a moment. "Isabella something. Valencia, I think." Emma's jaw dropped. "Isabella Valencia? Are you serious? The Isabella Valencia came to our farm?" James looked at his daughter in confusion. "I take it you've heard of her?" Emma was already grabbing her phone, fingers flying across the screen. "Dad, she's only like one of the biggest influencers on the planet. She has millions of followers across all her platforms. People literally buy anything she recommends." "Influencer?" James repeated the unfamiliar term, though he'd heard it in passing before. Alex leaned over Emma's shoulder as she pulled up Isabella's profile on her phone. "Whoa," he murmured, impressed. "That is her. Look at all these followers." James peered at the small screen his children were fixated on. There were professionally shot images of Isabella in various picturesque locations around the world, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, lounging on a tropical beach, wandering through colorful markets in what appeared to be chaff. Morocco. Each image had hundreds of thousands of likes and thousands of comments. "And she wanted to take pictures on our farm?" Alex asked incredulously. "Why?" Emma scrolled through the profile. "She does this Authentic America series sometimes, where she highlights rural areas and small towns. People love it. It's like her thing to find hidden gems that aren't on the typical tourist path." James was having trouble reconciling the young woman who had stood in his field with this apparent digital celebrity his children were describing. "So she makes money by taking pictures of herself in different places?" Emma sighed with the particular exasperation teenagers reserve for explaining modern concepts to their parents. "It's more complicated than that, Dad. She has sponsorship deals with major brands. She influences trends. She probably makes millions a year." "Millions?" James repeated skeptically. "For posting pictures online?" "It's a whole industry now," Alex added. "Some of these top influencers make more than CEOs of big companies." James shook his head, unable to fully grasp this new reality. "Well, regardless, she came, she took her pictures, she left. End of story. Now, who's going to help me fix that irrigation pipe tomorrow?" Both teenagers groaned, and the conversation moved on to the more familiar territory of farm chores and school assignments. James put the strange encounter out of his mind and went to bed early, his body aching from the day's physical labor. He had no idea that at that very moment, Isabella Valencia was selecting, editing, and posting the first of many photos taken at Hillcrest Valley Farm, carefully crafting a caption that would set in motion a chain of events beyond anything he could imagine. In her luxury hotel room in Omaha, Isabella sat cross-legged on the king-sized bed, her laptop open in front of her. The suite was bathed in the soft glow of ambient lighting, a stark contrast to the harsh fluorescent bulbs of the Harper farmhouse. A half-empty glass of expensive red wine sat on the nightstand beside her, as she meticulously edited the photos she had taken earlier that day. Isabella had built her career on her exceptional eye for what would resonate with her audience. At 28, she had transformed herself from a marketing graduate with a good aesthetic sense into one of the most powerful influencers in the digital landscape. What had started as a hobby posting stylized photos of her daily life during an internship in Paris had evolved into a multi-million-dollar business empire. Companies paid substantial sums for her to feature their products, fashion houses sent her their latest collections in hopes of a mention, and luxury hotels competed to host her for free in exchange for a single tally Instagram story. Her followers, now numbering in the millions across various platforms, hum on her every recommendation and aspired to emulate her carefully curated lifestyle. But recently, Isabella had sensed a shift in the digital atmosphere. The perfectly polished aesthetic that had defined influencer culture for years was beginning to feel stale. Her engagement metrics showed that her audience was responding more enthusiastically to her rare, unfiltered moments. A glimpse of real emotion, an unplanned encounter, an unexpected deviation from her usual bow. Content. Her Authentic America series had started as an experiment, a way to connect with a broader audience while showcasing a different side of her personality. To her surprise, these posts consistently outperformed her luxury travel content, attracting a new demographic to her platform and generating unprecedented engagement. The photos from Hillcrest Valley Farm were exactly what she had been looking for: genuine, timeless, with a raw beauty that couldn't be manufactured in a studio. As she scrolled through the images, Isabella paused on one that particularly struck her. She was seated on the old John Deere tractor, hair slightly tousled by the breeze, laughing genuinely at something James had said off camera. The golden hour sunlight bathed everything in a warm glow, the weathered barn and endless fields creating a perfect backdrop. There was something compelling about the juxtaposition her, in a simple white dress, against the rugged machinery and landscape. It felt real, in a way that her carefully orchestrated photo shoots rarely did. She selected the image and began crafting her caption. Lost count of the miles on this cross-country journey, but found myself at this hidden gem today, Hillcrest Valley Farm. Met James, a third-generation farmer fighting to preserve a way of life that's increasingly rare in our fast-paced world. His dedication to the land, despite mounting challenges, reminded me why I started this series. To showcase the authentic heart of America that beats far from the glitz of cities. This tractor has stories to tell, and so does the man who operates it. Hashtag Authentic America, hashtag Hillcrest Valley Farm, hashtag Real People, hashtag Nebraska, hashtag American Heartland. Isabella hesitated before hitting post, her marketing instincts kicking in. She rarely tagged specific small businesses or individuals that created expectations and potential complications. But something about James Harper and his struggling farm had resonated with her. Perhaps it was the genuine pride he took in his work, despite the obvious financial difficulties, or the way he had looked at her with complete disinterest in who she might be in the digital world. Making a quick decision, she added the farm's location and created a new tag for it. Then, crossing her mental fingers that she wasn't making a mistake, she posted the image to her main account with its 8 million followers. What happens in the heartland doesn't stay in the heartland, she murmured to herself as she closed her laptop and reached for her wine. By morning, she would know if her instincts about Hillcrest Valley Farm were correct. For now, she had other content to plan. James awoke before dawn, as he did every day, regardless of how tired he felt. The familiar aches in his back and shoulders greeted him as he swung his legs over the side of the bed, careful not to disturb his wife, Laura, who was still sleeping soundly. She worked the night shift as a nurse at the county hospital, one of the many ways the Harper family pieced together enough income to keep the farm running. He moved quietly through the darkened house, started the coffee maker, and sat at the kitchen table to plan his day while waiting for the brew to finish. The irrigation system needed fixing. The western field needed to be checked for potential crop disease he'd spotted yesterday, and he needed to call about the feed delivery that was already 3 days late. The list was endless and growing. By the time he stepped outside into the cool, pre-dawn air, mug of black coffee in hand, James had mentally prepared himself for another day of fighting the losing battle to keep Hillcrest Valley Farm afloat. The morning was peaceful, the kind of stillness that had kept him connected to this land despite all the hardships. He took a moment to appreciate the way the first hints of sunrise illuminated the dew-covered fields before heading to the barn to begin work. It was mid-morning when he first noticed something unusual. A car he didn't recognize was slowly driving past the farm, only to turn around and pass by again, this time more slowly. James straightened up from the irrigation pipe he was fixing and watched with curiosity as the car finally pulled up to his gate and stopped. An older couple emerged, cameras in hand, and began taking pictures of the farm from the road. This was odd enough to warrant investigation, so James wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. "Can I help you folks with something?" he called out, trying to keep his tone friendly despite his confusion. The woman, perhaps in her 60s, turned to him with an excited expression. "Oh, are you James Harper?" Taken aback, James nodded slowly. "I am. Do I know you?" The couple exchanged delighted glances. "We saw Isabella Valencia's post about your farm this morning. It was so moving that we decided to take a little detour on our road trip to see it for ourselves," the woman explained enthusiastically. "Isabella's post?" James repeated, his mind flashing back to the photographer from yesterday. "You mean she already put up those pictures she took?" The man nodded eagerly. "It's gone viral. Over 1 million likes already, and it's only been up for about 12 hours. Everyone's talking about Hillcrest Valley Farm and the story behind it." James stood there, completely baffled. 1 million people have seen a picture of my farm? "And your tractor," the woman added with a smile. "The photo of Isabella on that vintage John Deere is just stunning. She wrote such a beautiful caption about your family's 3 generations of farming and how you're preserving an authentic American tradition despite modern challenges." James was having trouble processing this information. How did she know about his family history? He must have mentioned it in passing during their brief conversation. And what did it mean that a photo had gone viral? Before he could formulate a response, another car pulled up behind the couples. "Would it be possible to get a picture with you?" the man asked hopefully. "Our daughters are huge fans of Isabella, and they'll never believe we actually found the farm from her post." I suppose that would be all right," James stammered, still trying to make sense of the situation. As he awkwardly posed for a photo with the enthusiastic couple, 2 more cars arrived. By the time he had finished answering their questions about the farm and his family's history, a small line of vehicles had formed along the road leading to his property. James retreated back to the house, his mind spinning. He found Emma in the kitchen, already awake despite it being summer break, her attention fixed on her phone. "Dad!" she exclaimed when she saw him. "Have you seen what's happening online? Isabella's post about our farm has absolutely exploded. It's her most engaged post of the year so far. People are going crazy over the story she told about us." "Ooh. What story?" James asked, his confusion mounting. "She barely spoke to me for an hour." Emma thrust her phone at him. "Look." James squinted at the small screen. There was the photo of Isabella sitting on his tractor, looking impossibly beautiful against the backdrop of his weathered barn and golden fields. The caption beneath it was far more detailed than he had expected, weaving a narrative about his family's farming legacy and their struggle to maintain it in the face of modern agricultural challenges. While not inaccurate, it had embellished their brief interaction into something that sounded like an in-depth interview. "This is crazy," he muttered, handing the phone back to Emma. "There are people showing up at the gate right now because of this." Emma's eyes widened. "Already? That's insane. Her followers usually take at least a day to track down the locations she features." She jumped up from her seat. "I need to see this." As Emma rushed outside, James's phone began ringing. It was Mike Johnson, his neighbor whose farm bordered his to the east. "James, what in the world is going on over there?" Mike asked without preamble. "I just drove by and there must be 15 cars parked along the road by your place. Is everything okay?" James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Apparently some internet celebrity took photos here yesterday, and now people are showing up to see the farm. I don't really understand it myself. Mike let out a low whistle. Well, whatever it is, you might want to figure out a way to manage it. Looks like more are arriving by the minute, and they're blocking the access road for the feed trucks. After thanking Mike for the heads up, James went back outside to assess the situation. What he saw left him speechless. In the 20 minutes he'd been inside, the trickle of visitors had turned into a steady stream. At least 30 people were now gathered outside his gate, taking photos of the farm from every angle. Some held printed copies of Isabella's post, comparing the image to the real-life view. Alex came jogging up from the fields, his expression a mixture of amusement and concern. "Dad, what's happening? The whole road is jammed with cars." James shook his head helplessly. "I have no idea how to handle this, son." Emma, who had been chatting excitedly with some of the visitors, rushed back to them. "Dad, people want to know if they can come in and take photos on the tractor, like Isabella did. Some are offering to pay." James was about to refuse. Automatically he had work to do, and the idea of strangers traipsing around his property made him uncomfortable when he caught sight of the irrigation pipe he'd been struggling to fix, without the proper parts. Parts he couldn't afford. He thought of the mortgage payment they were about to miss, and of Alex's college acceptance letter sitting on his desk, waiting for a deposit they didn't have. "How much are they offering?" he asked slowly. Emma's eyes gleamed with excitement. "One couple said they'd pay $50 just for a few minutes on the tractor, and there's a family who wants to know if they can take their Christmas card photo in front of the barn for $100. Alex let out a low whistle. "That's easy money, Dad." James stood there, torn between his natural reticence and the practical reality of their financial situation. After a moment's hesitation, he made a decision. "All right," he said finally. "Tell them we'll allow photos for a fee, but we need to be organized about this. Alex, move the new fence posts from beside the barn. We don't want anyone getting hurt. Emma, you collect the money and keep track of who's next. I'll supervise the tractor, make sure no one damages it." As his children rushed off to implement his impromptu plan, James stood for a moment, watching the growing crowd of strangers eager to capture a piece of what Isabella Valencia had presented to the world. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just crossed some invisible threshold, and that Hillcrest Valley Farm would never be quite the same again. By midday, James had reluctantly embraced his farm's sudden transformation into a tourist attraction. Emma had organized the visitors into an orderly queue, written out a price list on a piece of cardboard, and was handling the unexpected business with surprising efficiency. Alex alternated between helping his father manage the flow of people around the equipment and posting updates about the farm on his own social media accounts, capitalizing on the unexpected attention. Laura, who had been asleep after her night shift, emerged from the house around noon, utterly bewildered by the scene before her. James spotted her standing on the porch, still in her robe, staring wide-eyed at the line of people waiting to sit on their tractor. He quickly made his way to her, preparing himself for the confusion and potential disapproval. Laura had always been the practical one in their relationship, the one who questioned the wisdom of clinging to the struggling farm when they could sell and find more stable livelihoods. "What on earth is happening, James?" she asked as he approached, her voice a mixture of disbelief and concern. He explained the situation as best he could, watching her expression shift from confusion to cautious interest as he mentioned the money they had already collected, over $800 in just 3 hours. $800? She repeated, her nurse's practicality immediately calculating what bills that could cover. "Just for letting people take pictures?" James nodded, still somewhat disbelieving himself. "Emma's been keeping track. She says if the pace keeps up, we might make close to $2,000 by the end of the day." Laura's eyes widened. "That would cover next month's mortgage payment with some left over." She paused, looking out at the activity in their yard. "Is it safe, though, having all these strangers around our property?" "They've been respectful so far," James assured her. "Most of them just want a quick photo and then they leave. And I'm keeping an eye on things." Laura nodded slowly, the immediate financial benefit clearly weighing against her reservations. "I suppose we'd be foolish not to take advantage while it lasts," she conceded. "It's not like it'll still be happening next week." As the day progressed, the flow of visitors showed no signs of abating. In fact, it seemed to be increasing, By late afternoon, James had to ask Alex to direct traffic as the road leading to their farm became congested with cars. The local sheriff even drove by to make sure there wasn't a problem, ultimately offering advice on how to manage the impromptu parking situation rather than shutting it down. Around 4 o'clock, James's phone rang again. He didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Is this James Harper of Hillcrest Valley Farm?" a professional-sounding woman asked. "It is," James confirmed, stepping away from the noise of the visitors to hear better. "Mr. Harper, my name is Rebecca Winters. I'm a producer for Great Plains Today, the regional morning show. We've been seeing the remarkable social media response to your farm today, and we'd love to feature you on tomorrow's program. Would you be available for a brief interview about what it's like to suddenly become an internet sensation?" James nearly dropped his phone. "A television interview? About his farm? I'm not sure what I'd have to say," he stammered. "Just your authentic reaction to all this attention would be perfect," Rebecca assured him. "Our viewers love these kinds of heartwarming local stories, especially when they involve family farms like yours." After a brief discussion about logistics, James agreed to the interview. As he hung up, he spotted Emma running toward him, her face alight with excitement. Dad! Isabella Valencia just posted another photo from here, and she tagged us again and mentioned how everyone should support local farms." She thrust her phone at him. "And look at the comments. People are asking if we sell produce directly to consumers or if we have a farm stay program." James looked at the screen, where another beautifully edited photo showed Isabella leaning against his barn, the golden hour light making everything look like a scene from a nostalgic film. The caption read, "Overwhelmed by your response to Hillcrest Valley Farm. Your enthusiasm proves what I've always believed: authentic experiences and connections are what we're all craving in this digital age. If you visit, remember, this is a working farm and a family's livelihood. Support local agriculture. #ShopLocal, #FarmFresh, #AuthenticAmerica." As he handed the phone back to Emma, James noticed a sleek black SUV pulling up to the gate. A well-dressed man in his 30s emerged and made his way directly to where James was standing, bypassing the line of people waiting to take photos. "Mr. Harper?" the man inquired, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel Carson, Regional Marketing Director for Heartland Agricultural Supplies. I'd love to have a word with you about a potential business opportunity, if you have a moment." James looked from Daniel to the crowd of visitors, to Emma's excited face, to the farmhouse where Laura now stood on the porch with a calculating expression. In less than 24 hours, his quiet, struggling farm had transformed into something entirely unrecognizable. And somehow, he knew this was just the beginning. "Let's talk in the house," James said to Daniel, making a decision to at least hear what the man had to say. As they walked toward the farmhouse, James couldn't help but wonder what other unexpected visitors the coming days would bring, and whether this sudden attention would prove to be their salvation or create complications he couldn't yet imagine. Inside the modest kitchen of the Harper farmhouse, James sat across from Daniel Carson, acutely aware of the contrast between the marketing executive's tailored suit and his own dirt-stained work clothes. Laura had hurriedly changed out of her robe into jeans and a blouse, and now sat beside James, her expression cautiously optimistic as Daniel outlined his proposal. "Heartland Agricultural Supplies has been looking to partner with authentic, family-owned farms for our new marketing campaign," Daniel explained, sliding a glossy folder across the table. "We want to highlight the real people behind American agriculture, not actors or models. When I saw Isabella Valencia's post about your farm going viral this morning, I knew we had found our ideal partner." James glanced at Laura, who was already flipping through the folder with interest. "Partner how, exactly?" he asked. Daniel smiled, clearly prepared for this question. "We'd like to feature Hillcrest Valley Farm in our upcoming regional ad campaign. Print ads, social media content, possibly even a television commercial. We'd pay you a licensing fee for the use of your farm's image and name, plus compensation for any days of filming or photography on your property." Laura looked up from the folder. "And what kind of compensation are we talking about?" "For the initial 6-month campaign, we're prepared to offer $25,000, Daniel stated. James nearly choked on the coffee he'd just sipped. $25,000? That was more than half of what the farm had cleared in profit the entire previous year. That's substantial, he managed, trying to maintain his composure. Daniel nodded. We believe in fair compensation for our partners. Additionally, we'd provide you with a supply credit at any of our stores, which would cover most farm essentials like feed, fertilizer, and basic equipment parts, for the duration of the campaign. As Daniel continued outlining the details of the potential partnership, James's mind was racing. This sudden infusion of cash could solve so many of their immediate problems. The mortgage payments, Alex's college tuition, the crucial equipment repairs they'd been postponing. But it also felt surreal, almost too good to be true. Why us? He asked finally, interrupting Daniel's explanation of the marketing timeline. There are thousands of family farms in the region. What makes ours special enough for all this? Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. Mr. Harper, what you have to understand is that in today's market, authenticity is incredibly valuable. When someone like Isabella Valencia features a location, it instantly becomes desirable to a massive audience. But more than that, the story of your farm 3 generations, facing modern challenges, the classic American struggle that resonates with people. We can't manufacture that kind of authentic narrative. End quote. Laura placed her hand over James's. We should consider it, she said quietly. This could be the break we've been hoping for. Before James could respond, the kitchen door burst open, and Emma rushed in, her eyes wide with excitement. Dad! Mom! You won't believe this! A producer from Farm to Table magazine just called my phone. They found our number through the business listing. They want to do a feature article on us for their American Heritage issue. Daniel smiled knowingly. And so it begins, he murmured. I strongly suggest you consider our offer soon, Mr. Harper. Once the media attention escalates, you'll likely be approached by many companies. We're prepared to move quickly and can have contracts drawn up by press tomorrow. After Daniel left, promising to email the formal proposal that evening, James, Laura, and Emma sat at the kitchen table in stunned silence. Through the window, they could see Alex still managing the steady stream of visitors, who showed no signs of dispersing despite the approaching evening hours. What do we do? James asked finally. The question directed at no one in particular. Laura inhaled deeply, her practical nature asserting itself even amid the chaos. We take this one step at a time, she said firmly. First, we need to manage the immediate situation, all those people out there. Then we consider these offers carefully, read every line of every contract, and make sure we're not signing away anything we'll regret. Emma was practically bouncing in her chair. But this is huge. Do you realize what this could mean for us? For the farm? We could save everything. James nodded slowly, still processing the dramatic shift in their circumstances. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. This attention could disappear as quickly as it came. These internet things often do, from what I understand. Which is exactly why we should capitalize on it now, Laura pointed out. Pragmatically, if Daniel is right and more offers are coming, we need to be prepared. Emma, you understand social media better than either of us. I think you should handle those inquiries. Emma's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and pride at being entrusted with such responsibility. I can totally do that. I'll set up official accounts for the farm right away so people can follow us. Official accounts? James repeated, feeling increasingly out of his depth. On Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, everywhere, Emma explained. We need to establish our online presence immediately. That way, even if Isabella's posts fade from attention, we'll have our own platform. The conversation was interrupted by Alex entering the kitchen, his face flushed from hours in the sun. We've made over $2,000 today, he announced, placing a cash box on the table. And people are asking if we'll be open for photos tomorrow too. James looked at his family, each of their faces reflecting different aspects of the same cautious hope. After years of struggling, of watching their options narrow with each passing season, a door had suddenly opened. Whether it led to salvation or further complications remained to be seen, but the alternative was the slow death of everything they had worked for. All right, he said finally. We'll see this through, whatever it is. But we do it together, as a family, and we remember what matters most: this land, this home, our values. No amount of money or attention changes that. The following morning dawned bright and clear, much like the previous day, but everything else had changed. James awoke to the unfamiliar sound of his phone buzzing repeatedly with notifications. Emma had helped him set up a new email address specifically for farm business and had shown him how to connect it to his phone, a technological enhancement he had previously resisted as unnecessary. Now, squinting at the screen, he saw dozens of new messages: interview requests from local and regional publications, inquiries about farm tours, questions about purchasing produce directly, and even a puzzling message asking if the farm was available as a wedding venue. Downstairs, he found Laura and Emma already at the kitchen table, laptops open, deep in discussion about social media strategy. A phrase James had never expected to hear in his farmhouse kitchen. "Good morning," Laura greeted him with a quick smile. "Coffee's fresh. We've been up for hours getting organized. You've got a TV interview at 9, remember? And Emma's been fielding messages since dawn. The Hillcrest Valley Farm Instagram account already has over 5,000 followers," Emma announced proudly. "I posted some photos Alex took yesterday, and they're getting tons of engagement. People love the authenticity." James poured himself coffee, feeling slightly dazed. "The TV people are really coming? I half expected them to cancel." "They called to confirm 30 minutes ago," Laura replied. "And they're bringing a full crew. They want to film you working on the tractor naturally." Alex entered through the back door, already dressed for farm work. "I cleared space in the south field for more visitor parking," he reported. "And I set up that temporary fence line you mentioned, Dad, to keep people away from the equipment." James nodded gratefully. Despite the whirlwind of changes, farm work still needed to be done. Crops wouldn't wait for their 15 minutes of fame to pass. "The irrigation system still needs fixing," he reminded everyone. "And we have to check the western field for that potential blight. Fame or no fame, we're still farmers first." "Actually," Laura interjected, "I called Johnson's Farm Supply this morning. They're sending someone out to fix the irrigation system today free of charge. Apparently, the owner saw Isabella's post and wants to support a local farming legacy or something to that effect. They're hoping you'll mention them in an interview if anyone asks who helps maintain your equipment." James blinked in surprise. "Free of charge? That's a $500 repair, at least." Laura nodded. "Amazing what a little publicity can do, isn't it?" By the time the television crew arrived, James had managed to shower and change into his newest pair of jeans and a clean plaid shirt, his version of dressing up. Laura had insisted he allow her to trim his hair slightly, though she'd respected his refusal to do anything fancy with it. The interview itself was a surreal experience. The reporter, a cheerful woman named Diane, positioned James beside his tractor, which had been hastily cleaned by Alex and Emma, and asked him questions about the farm's history, his family's legacy, and his reaction to the sudden attention. "It's been quite surprising," James admitted, trying not to look directly at the camera pointing at his face. "We're just ordinary people trying to make a living off the land, like my father and grandfather before me. But there's nothing ordinary about becoming an internet sensation overnight," Diane prompted with a practiced smile. "How does it feel to have Isabella Valencia shine her spotlight on your farm?" James shifted uncomfortably. "It's strange, to be honest. Yesterday morning, I was worried about fixing an irrigation pipe and making our mortgage payment. Today I'm talking to you on television. I'm grateful for the attention if it helps keep this farm going. But at the end of the day, the work remains the same." End quote. His straightforward answer seemed to please Diane, who nodded appreciatively. "That's what people respond to, I think, that authenticity. In a world of filters and carefully curated content, there's something refreshing about a place like Hillcrest Valley Farm." After the television crew departed, promising that the segment would air the following morning, James found himself with barely a moment to catch his breath before the next wave of visitors began arriving. Today, they came prepared with picnic blankets, cameras with tripods, and what appeared to be professional photography equipment. Emma, who had appointed herself the farm's unofficial public relations manager, had set up a small booth near the gate with a proper cash box, printed price lists for different photo opportunities, and even t-shirts bearing a hastily designed Hillcrest Valley Farm logo that she and a friend had stayed up most of the night creating. "Where did those come from?" James asked, pointing at the stack of shirts in disbelief. Emma beamed. "Remember Dad's friend who owns that print shop in town? I called him last night, explained the situation, and he rushed an order for us. We're selling them for $25 each, and we've already sold 15. This morning." Before James could respond, a sleek black car pulled up, and a woman in a business suit emerged, carrying a leather portfolio. She approached with confidence, bypassing the line of visitors waiting to pay for photo opportunities. "Mr. Harper? Rebecca Chen, Midwest Heritage Foods. I was hoping to discuss a potential partnership opportunity with you. Our company is looking to feature authentic family farms in our new line of premium canned goods, and your story aligns perfectly with our brand values." End quote. James looked around helplessly for Laura, who was busy talking to a local newspaper reporter by the barn. This was exactly the kind of business discussion she was better equipped to handle. Before he could excuse himself, another car pulled up, this one, a luxury SUV with out-of-state plates. A man in designer casual wear approached, already extending his business card. "James Harper? Nathaniel Ross, Golden Hour Productions. We're developing a documentary series on the revival of American family farms in the digital age, and we'd love to feature Hillcrest Valley as one of our central locations." By mid-afternoon, James had retreated to the relative sanctuary of his tractor shed, where he sat on an overturned milk crate, trying to make sense of the business cards, brochures, and hastily scribbled notes from the various meetings he'd been pulled into throughout the day. Laura found him there, looking as overwhelmed as he felt. "There you are," she said, sitting beside him on another crate. "It's absolutely crazy out there." James nodded wearily. "Did you know there are companies that want to pay us just to post photos of their products on our farm? And someone asked if we'd host a farm-to-table experience dinner next month for some corporate retreat. What even is that?" Laura couldn't help but laugh at his bewildered expression. "Welcome to 2025, honey. Everything's content now." She placed her hand over his. "But the good news is, all this attention is translating into real opportunities. That agricultural supply company sent over their contract. It's actually better than Daniel initially described. And I've had 3 different local restaurants inquire about purchasing our produce directly, at premium prices." "It's just so much, so fast," James admitted. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's been a mistake, that they meant to make another farm famous." Laura squeezed his hand. "No mistake. You've worked this land with dedication and integrity for 20 years, just like your father and grandfather before you. Maybe the universe is finally paying attention." Their moment of quiet reflection was interrupted by Alex bursting into the shed, his expression a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Dad! Mom! You need to come see this right now." They followed him out to the farmhouse, where Emma was standing on the porch, her eyes glued to her phone. She looked up as they approached, her face pale with shock. "Isabella Valencia is live on Instagram right now, and she's announcing that she's coming back to visit us tomorrow. She says she's been so moved by the response to her posts about our farm that she wants to do a proper feature on rural American family farms, starting with us." End quote. James and Laura exchanged stunned glances. The woman who had inadvertently started this whirlwind was returning, this time with full awareness of her impact. "She says she's bringing her full team," Emma continued, still scrolling through her phone. "Photographers, videographers, her personal stylist, everything. And, oh my God, she's going to stay overnight to experience authentic farm life for her followers." Laura's practical nature immediately asserted itself. "Stay here? In our house? But we don't have a guest room set up, and the spare bedroom is full of storage. And she says they'll bring everything they need," Emma interrupted, her voice rising with excitement. "They just need our permission and BS. Participation." "Dad, this is huge." "An extended feature from Isabella Valencia could keep us relevant for months, maybe even years." James looked around at his farm mat, the visitor still taking photos by his tractor. at the news van pulling up for an evening segment, at the stack of business cards from companies eager to align themselves with Hillcrest Valley's sudden authenticity. In just over 24 hours, everything had changed. "Tell them yes," he said finally, making a decision. "But also tell them that we're still a working farm. If Isabella Valencia wants the authentic experience, she'll have to be ready for 5 a.m. chores and actual work, not just photo opportunities." Emma's fingers flew across her phone screen, composing the response. "I'll make that very clear," she promised. "Though I doubt Isabella Valencia has ever collected eggs or milked a cow in her life." As the sun began to set on the second day of their unexpected fame, James stood on his porch, watching the last of the day's visitors depart. The farm was quieter now, settling back into a semblance of normality that felt increasingly distant. Tomorrow would bring Isabella Valencia and her entourage, and with them, undoubtedly, a fresh wave of attention and opportunities, for better or worse. Hillcrest Valley Farm had been put on the map, not as one of countless struggling family farms fighting to survive in a changing agricultural landscape, but as a symbol of something that apparently resonated deeply with, quote, people. Authenticity, tradition, perseverance. If leveraging that sudden symbolic status could secure his family's future and preserve the legacy he'd inherited, then James was willing to adapt, uncomfortable as it might feel. He watched as the final car pulled away, leaving only the golden fields, the weathered barn, and the old tractor that had unexpectedly become the centerpiece of their newfound fame. Whatever tomorrow brought, the essence of Hillcrest Valley would remain unchanged. Of that much, at least, James was certain. The next morning dawned with an energy unlike anything Hillcrest Valley Farm had experienced before. James awoke at his usual pre-dawn hour to find that Laura was already up, frantically cleaning the already tidy house in preparation for their famous visitor. "You know she's probably stayed in 5-star hotels all over the world, right?" End quote, James commented as he poured his morning coffee. "I doubt she's expecting luxury accommodations here." Laura paused her vigorous wiping of the kitchen counters. "It's not about luxury, it's about pride. If millions of people are going to see the inside of our home, even in the background of photos, I want it to look its best." James couldn't argue with that logic. Instead, he headed out to begin the morning chores, finding Alex already in the barn, mucking out stalls with unusual enthusiasm. "You're up early," James observed, grabbing a pitchfork to help. Alex grinned. "Couldn't sleep. Too excited. Do you think Isabella might let me show her how to drive the tractor? That would make an awesome video." James chuckled at his son's newfound interest in farm tasks he'd previously considered mundane. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We don't even know how long she's staying or what exactly she wants to do while she's here." They didn't have to wonder long. Just as the sun was fully rising over the eastern fields, the sound of vehicles approaching broke the morning quiet. James and Alex stepped out of the barn to see a small convoy making its way up the dirt road to the farm. A sleek black SUV, followed by a van with what appeared to be equipment, and a third vehicle that looked like a modified RV. "That doesn't look like someone planning to experience authentic farm accommodations," James muttered as the vehicles pulled into the cleared area near the house. Emma burst out of the farmhouse, her hair hastily brushed, eyes wide with excitement. "They're early! Isabella said they wouldn't be here until 9. The doors of the SUV opened, and Isabella Valencia emerged, looking impossibly fresh and camera-ready despite the early hour. She wore stylish yet practical-looking overalls, designer boots that had clearly never seen a day of work, and a flannel shirt tied at the waist. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect messy bun that James suspected had taken considerable time to arrange. "James! Emma!" she called out with genuine warmth, approaching them with open arms. "Thank you so much for having us. I hope you don't mind the early arrival. We wanted to capture the morning light on the farm. It's absolutely magical." Behind her, a team of people were already unloading equipment from the van: cameras, lighting rigs, what looked like portable wind machines, and various other devices James couldn't identify. "Welcome back to Hillcrest Valley," he managed, awkwardly accepting the brief hug Isabella gave him. "We, weren't expecting quite so many people." Isabella waved a dismissive hand. Oh, don't worry about my team, they're incredibly self-sufficient. And we've brought the RV for our accommodations, so we won't be imposing on your space. Though I personally would love to experience a night in a real farmhouse, if that offer still stands. Before James could respond, Emma stepped forward. Of course it does. We've prepared everything. Our house isn't fancy, but it's comfortable. Isabella beamed. Perfect. I want this to be as authentic as possible. My followers are absolutely captivated by your story, James. The third-generation farmer fighting to preserve a vanishing way of life in the face of corporate agriculture. It's resonating on a level I haven't seen before. James shifted uncomfortably, still uneasy with being cast as some kind of symbolic figure. We're just trying to make a living, like everyone else. And that's exactly why people connect with you, Isabella insisted. In a world full of artifice, you're the real deal. Now, would it be possible to start with a tour? I'd love to capture the full morning routine of a working farm for my followers. What followed was unlike any morning James had ever experienced on his farm. Simple tasks he'd performed thousands of times, checking on livestock, inspecting crops, maintaining equipment, were transformed into carefully orchestrated scenes. Isabella's photographer, a serious young man named Diego, directed James to repeat actions multiple times from different angles, while Isabella narrated the process for her phone camera. This is how a real farmer starts his day, she explained to her invisible audience as James demonstrated how to check the soil moisture in the eastern field. No fancy technology, just generations of knowledge passed down through the family. James can tell more from touching this soil than most agricultural scientists with their equipment. James wanted to point out that he actually did use soil moisture meters and other modern tools when he could afford them. But he held his tongue. The narrative Isabella was crafting, while simplified, wasn't entirely untrue. And if it helped secure his farm's future, he could tolerate some romantic embellishment. By mid-morning, Laura had joined them. Having finished her preparations of the house, she adapted to the cameras with surprising ease, showcasing her knowledge of the medicinal herbs she grew in her small garden. A skill she'd learned from James's mother years ago. Isabella was particularly enthralled by this, positioning it as an example of women's wisdom being preserved alongside agricultural traditions. The day progressed in a blur of activity. Isabella's team captured footage of every aspect of farm life, from Alex demonstrating how to operate the tractor, his wish granted, to Emma explaining how they preserve vegetables from their garden for winter use. Each ordinary task was transformed into something picturesque and meaningful through the lens of Isabella's narrative. Throughout it all, a steady stream of visitors continued to arrive at the farm, now doubly excited by the presence of Isabella herself. Emma managed this traffic with increasing proficiency, having set up a more formal admission system with timed entry to prevent overcrowding. As the afternoon progressed, James found himself momentarily alone with Isabella as her team reconfigured their equipment for the golden hour lighting. She sat beside him on the porch steps, setting aside her ever-present phone for a rare moment. "Thank you for being so accommodating," she said, her tone more genuine than the performative enthusiasm she used when filming. "I know this must all seem very strange to you." James nodded, watching the activity unfolding across his property. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, to be honest. Yesterday I was worried about losing this place, and today there are companies lining up to throw money at us just to be associated with our authentic brand, whatever that means." Isabella smiled, a hint of something like wistfulness crossing her features. "The irony doesn't escape me. I make my living creating carefully curated content that looks spontaneous and authentic, while actual authentic people like you rarely get noticed." She paused, looking out over the fields. "For what it's worth, I think you deserve every opportunity coming your way." "I appreciate that," James replied, "though I can't help wondering how long this will last. What happens when the internet's attention moves on to the next viral sensation?" Isabella turned to look at him directly. "That's why I'm here, James. I want to help you build something sustainable from this moment. My followers are loyal. If I position Hillcrest Valley as more than just a passing feature, they'll stay engaged. And those business opportunities you're getting? They could provide long-term stability if managed correctly. You'd do that for us?" "Why?" James asked, genuinely curious. Isabella looked away, her expression complicated. Would you believe me if I said I'm tired of the superficiality of my usual content? That featuring your farm and seeing the response reminded me why I started doing this in the first place, to connect people to experiences and places they might never encounter otherwise. Before James could respond, Isabella's assistant approached, signaling that they were ready to continue filming. The moment of candor passed, and Isabella was once again the polished influencer, her vulnerability carefully tucked away behind her professional facade. The remainder of the day was a whirlwind of activity, culminating in what Isabella called the golden hour shoot, a series of carefully orchestrated scenes capturing the farm bathed in the warm light of the setting sun. James, Laura, and their children were positioned strategically throughout the property, performing tasks that looked natural but had been meticulously arranged for maximum visual impact. As twilight fell, Isabella's team began packing up their equipment while she prepared for her overnight stay in the Bala farmhouse. True to her word, the rest of her entourage would sleep in the luxury RV parked near the barn. Over a simple dinner of Laura's homemade chicken stew and fresh bread, Isabella charmed the Harper family with stories of her travels around the world. Even James found himself laughing at her tales of misadventures in remote locations where her usual glamorous persona had been comically out of place. "So, there I was," she recounted, gesturing with her bread, trying to look effortlessly chic for this photo shoot in the Moroccan desert. "When this camel decides my designer scarf looks delicious and tries to eat it right off 10. My neck." The camera was rolling the whole time, and that video got more engagement than any perfectly posed shot I've ever posted. After dinner, Isabella surprised them by asking to see family photo albums, a request that seemed to stem from genuine interest rather than content creation. As her phone remained untouched throughout the intimate family viewing, she listened attentively as James narrated the history of the farm through 3 generations of Harpers, asking thoughtful questions about agricultural changes over the decades. Later, as the household settled for the night, James found himself standing on the back porch, contemplating the surreal turn his life had taken. Isabella joined him, wrapped in a borrowed sweater against the night chill. "Your family is wonderful," she said simply, standing beside him to gaze at the star-filled sky. "You've built something truly meaningful here." "We've tried," James acknowledged. "It hasn't always been easy." Isabella nodded. "The most worthwhile things rarely are." She turned to face him. "I meant what I said earlier. I want to help you leverage this attention into something lasting." With the right approach, Hillcrest Valley could become more than just a struggling farmette. Could be a brand, a destination, a symbol of everything people are craving in this disconnected world. James considered her words carefully. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to make sure that whenever we do, the farm itself, the actual working farm, remains viable. I'm not interested in becoming a tourist attraction if it means giving up what we actually are." "That's exactly why this will work," Isabella insisted. "People are responding to the reality of this place, not some artificial construct. The key is balancing the authentic with the sustainable." As they continued talking, outlining possibilities for the farm's future that James had never imagined, he found himself cautiously warming to Isabella's vision. Beyond the polished exterior of the global influencer, there was a shrewd business mind and, surprisingly, what seemed like genuine concern for his family's welfare. When they finally bid each other goodnight, James felt a cautious optimism taking root alongside his lingering disbelief. Whatever came next for Hillcrest Valley Farm, it would be unlike anything the Harper family had experienced before. The following morning, Isabella was up before dawn, joining James for the early chores without complaint despite the hour. Her team filmed her collecting eggs from the henhouse after several retakes to get the perfect shot, and helping to feed the small herd of cattle that provided the farm's secondary income. "My followers are going to lose their minds over this content," Isabella's content director commented as they reviewed the footage. The juxtaposition of Isabella Valencia, usually seen at fashion shows and luxury resorts, doing actual farm work, its marketing gold. By mid-morning, local media had caught wind of Isabella's presence, and several news crews had arrived, to capture the unlikely pairing of global influencer and local farmer. James found himself standing beside Isabella for interviews, awkwardly fielding questions about their collaboration and the farm's sudden fame. "It's been a surprising experience," he admitted when asked about the impact of her initial post. "But a welcome one. Small family farms like ours are disappearing across America, and if this attention helps us survive and thrive, we're grateful for it." Isabella deftly handled the more pointed questions about whether her interest in the farm was merely a calculated content strategy. "What began as a spontaneous photo opportunity has evolved into something much more meaningful," she explained smoothly. "The Harper family represents a vital part of American heritage that deserves recognition and support. I'm committed to using my platform to highlight their story not just today, but going forward." As the interviews concluded, Isabella pulled James aside. "I have something to discuss with you," she said, her expression unusually serious. "My team has been-on calls all morning with several companies that want to partner with both me and Hillcrest Valley Farm on various initiatives. There's real money on the table here. James, life-changing money." James felt a flutter of both excitement and apprehension. "What kind of initiatives?" "Everything from a sustainable farming product line to a documentary series," Isabella explained. "But the biggest opportunity is from Heartland Heritage Foods. They want to launch a premium line of organic, family farm-sourced products, featuring Hillcrest Valley as their flagship partner farm. We're talking a guaranteed purchase agreement for all your produce at above-market rates, plus licensing fees for using your story and image." James's mind raced with the implications. "That sounds substantial." "It would be a multi-year contract with guaranteed minimum payments," Isabella continued. "Enough to secure the farm's financial future and then some. But they want an answer quickly, ideally before I leave today." The pressure of such a significant decision with so little time for consideration made James uncomfortable. "I'd need to discuss this with Laura, review any contracts carefully. We can't just jump into something like this." Isabella nodded understanding. "Of course. My business manager can walk you through the details while my team finishes up the shooting schedule. Just know that my involvement here significantly increases the value of these deals. Companies are willing to pay a premium for the combined package of my endorsement and your authentic farm." End quote. The remainder of the morning passed in a blur of activity. While Isabella completed her content creation, James and Laura sat with her business manager, reviewing the preliminary terms of the various offers. The numbers were staggering, far beyond anything they had imagined possible just days earlier. "This Heartland Heritage deal alone would clear all our debts and secure the farm for at least 5 years, Laura whispered to James as they took a moment to confer privately. "And Alex's college tuition would be covered completely." James nodded, still struggling to process the magnitude of the opportunity before them. "But we'd be committing to changing how we operate, transition into fully organic production, hosting regular visitor events, being the public face of this product line. It's a lot more than just farming." "Fuck. It's evolving," Laura countered. "Just like your grandfather evolved from horses to tractors, and your father adopted new irrigation techniques. This is our evolution, James finding a way to keep the farm viable in a changing world." By early afternoon, James and Laura had made their decision. They would accept the Heartland Heritage Foods offer, with some negotiated amendments to ensure they retained control over key aspects of farm operations and family privacy. As Isabella prepared to depart, her team packing up the last of their equipment, she stood with the Harper family near the old tractor, where it had all begun just 3 days earlier. "I'll be posting the first of our farm series content tonight," she told them, her professional demeanor softened by what seemed like genuine attachment. "But this isn't the end of our partnership. I'll be back regularly as we launch the Heartland Heritage line, and my team will help you manage your own social media presence in the meantime." Emma, who had been diligently taking notes throughout the day on everything from content scheduling to hashtag strategies, nodded eagerly. "I've already mapped out our content calendar for the next month, focusing on the seasonal aspects of farm life that your followers responded to most strongly." Isabella smiled approvingly. "You have a natural talent for this, Emma. Don't be surprised if you end up with internship offers from marketing agencies after they see what you've done here." As final goodbyes were exchanged and Isabella's convoy prepared to depart, she pulled James aside for one last private word. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," she said quietly. "I know this has all been overwhelming, and probably not what you ever imagined for your farm. But I want you to know that I take this responsibility seriously. Your family's legacy matters." James, never one for lengthy expressions of emotion, simply nodded. "We're grateful for the opportunity. Just hope we can live up to all the expectations." Isabella's expression softened. "Just keep being exactly who you are, James. That's what resonated with people in the first place." With a final smile, she turned and walked to her waiting vehicle, waving to the small crowd of visitors who had gathered to catch a glimpse of her departure. As the convoy disappeared down the dirt road, James stood with his family, all of them slightly dazed by the whirlwind of the past 3 days. "What now?" Alex asked, breaking the momentary silence. James looked around at his farm, the same fields, the same barn, the same tractor, all somehow transformed by nothing more than a shift in perception and a global spotlight. "Now," he said slowly, "we figure out how to be both who we've always been and who we need to become. The farm still needs tending, crops still need harvesting, but we've got new opportunities too, new responsibilities." Laura slipped her hand into his. "We'll find a balance, together." As they walked back toward the farmhouse, James noticed a young couple with a small child approaching cautiously from the visitor area Emma had established. They looked uncertain, as if unsure whether they were still welcome now that Isabella had departed. Making a spontaneous decision, James changed direction to greet them. "Welcome to Hillcrest Valley Farm," he said, extending his hand in welcome. "Can I show you around?" The genuine smile that spread across his face surprised even him. Perhaps this new chapter, unexpected as it was, didn't have to feel foreign. Perhaps it could simply be an extension of what the Harper family had always done, working their land, preserving their heritage, and now sharing it with a world that had suddenly discovered its value. As James led the young family toward the tractor that had started it all, he felt a sense of cautious optimism taking root. Hillcrest Valley Farm had been put on the map in ways he could never have imagined, but its heart, the dedication, integrity, and connection to the land that had sustained 3 generations of Harpers, remained unchanged. And that, he realized, was the most authentic thing of all. 1 month later, the early autumn sun cast long shadows across Hillcrest Valley Farm as James steered his tractor, now fully restored, with parts that had previously been financially out of reach, along the edge of the western burr field. From this vantage point, he could see the significant changes that had transformed his property in just 30 days. The barn, once weathered and practical, had been carefully restored to enhance its rustic charm while improving its functionality. The farmhouse sported a fresh coat of paint and new energy-efficient windows. The gravel driveway had been extended and properly graded to accommodate the steady flow of visitors that had become a regular feature of life at Hillcrest Valley. Near the entrance to the property, a small but tasteful timber-framed building now housed the farm store, where visitors could purchase Hillcrest Valley-branded products, everything from fresh produce to Emma's surprisingly popular line of homemade preserves and Laura's urban-fused vinegars. The preliminary products from the Heartland Heritage Foods line were prominently displayed, featuring the Harper family's story and images on the packaging. Adjacent to the store, a neatly fenced area contained picnic tables and a modest playground constructed of natural materials. Here, families could enjoy the Hillcrest Valley Farm experience, a carefully orchestrated visit that combined educational elements about sustainable farming with Instagram-worthy photo opportunities. James brought the tractor to a stop and surveyed the scene with mixed emotions. The financial transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. The farm's mortgage was now paid in full. Alex had started college with all expenses covered. Equipment that had been limping along on repairs and prayer had been replaced or thoroughly refurbished. There was even a healthy emergency fund in the bank for the first time in the farm's recent history. But the personal adjustment had been more challenging. James was still acclimating to the fact that his daily work now included scheduled appearances for visitors, meetings with marketing teams, and video calls with Isabella Valencia to coordinate their ongoing CASHA collaboration. He found himself alternating between gratitude for the farm's newfound security and a nagging sense of disorientation at how quickly everything had changed. Laura approached the tractor, waiting to catch his attention. She had reduced her nursing hours to part-time to help manage the farm's expanding business operations, discovering an unexpected talent for strategic planning and financial management in the process. "The film crew from Modern Farming magazine will be here in an hour," she reminded him as he cut the engine. "And Emma wanted to know if you could check the lighting in the north field before they arrive. She says it's perfect for the harvest heritage theme they want to capture." James nodded, still somewhat bemused by his 16-year-old daughter's rapid transformation into a social media and marketing prodigy. Emma's intuitive understanding of what would resonate with online audiences had proven invaluable in maintaining the momentum of the farm's viral fame. "I'll head over there now," he agreed. "How are visitor numbers today?" "Steady," Laura replied. "About 40 so far, which is actually perfect enough to make it worthwhile, but not so many that it feels overcrowded. Emma's timed entry system is working well." As James made his way toward the north field, he passed several visitors, a young couple posing for photos by a carefully arranged display of pumpkins and autumn flowers, a family participating in the BIA Junior Farmer experience where children could collect eggs and feed the gentler farm animals, and a group of photography enthusiasts capturing the picturesque landscape. Alex, home for the weekend from Agricultural College, was leading a small tour, confidently explaining sustainable farming practices to an attentive audience. His son's newfound confidence and sense of purpose was perhaps the most gratifying change of all. The boy who had once been uncertain about his future on the struggling farm was now eagerly studying innovative agricultural techniques that he planned to implement at Hillcrest Valley. James reached the north field and checked the lighting conditions, as Emma had requested. His daughter had been right. As usual, the late afternoon sun filtering through the trees along the field's edge created a golden glow that would undoubtedly photograph beautifully. It still amazed him how Emma could visualize these things, how she had developed an almost instinctive understanding of what would translate effectively to digital media. "Perfect, isn't it?" Emma's voice came from behind him. She approached with her tablet in hand, already making notes and snapping preliminary photos to show the magazine crew. At 16, she had become the farm's unofficial creative director, her bedroom walls now covered with content calendars and marketing plans, rather than the pop star posters of just a few months earlier. "You've got a good eye," James acknowledged, still somewhat amazed by his daughter's transformation. "The magazine people will be pleased." Emma nodded, professionally satisfied. Isabella's team called earlier. The first batch of Hillcrest Valley preserves sold out on her recommendation alone. They're pushing up the timeline for the expanded product line. James shook his head in continued disbelief. "I still can't wrap my head around people in New York and Los Angeles paying premium prices for jam made from our berries." "It's not just jam, Dad," Emma corrected him with the patient tone she now often used when explaining marketing concepts. "It's an authentic farm-to-table experience in a jar. It's a connection to a heritage and lifestyle they romanticize. It's a good batch of strawberry preserves with a fancy label," James finished with a wry smile. Emma rolled her eyes, but smiled back. "Well, yes, that too. But the story matters. Our story matters." That was the part James was still reconciling himself to, the commodification of their family history, their struggles, their everyday existence. What had once been simply their life was now a narrative, a brand, an aspirational image for people searching for authenticity in an increasingly digital world. The film crew from Modern Farming magazine arrived precisely on schedule, a small but efficient team with state-of-the-art equipment. They were professional and respectful, clearly having done their research on Hillcrest Valley's story. The photographer, a woman named Diane with decades of experience shooting agricultural subjects, immediately appreciated the lighting conditions in the north field. "This is exactly what we're looking for," she told James as her assistant set up equipment. The modern farmer, embracing traditional methods but with contemporary understanding. Your story is resonating so strongly across demographics." The interview and photo shoot progressed smoothly, with James finding himself increasingly comfortable in the role he had unexpectedly inherited, the thoughtful steward of agricultural tradition, adapting to a changing world. The questions were intelligent and allowed him to speak genuinely about both the challenges of modern farming and the unexpected opportunities that had come their way. As the crew packed up, the magazine's editor approached James with a business card. "We're developing a special series on American family farms in transition," she explained. "Your perspective would be valuable. Would you consider being a contributor? Nothing too demanding, perhaps a monthly column on balancing tradition with innovation." 2 months earlier, such a request would have seemed absurd. Now, James merely nodded and pocketed the card. "I'll give it some thought," he promised, making a mental note to discuss it with Laura. That evening, after the visitors had departed and the magazine crew had left with their footage, the Harper family gathered around their kitchen table as they did every night. But unlike the tension-filled dinners of the past, where financial worries had often overshadowed conversation, the atmosphere was now one of purposeful planning and cautious optimism. "The architect sent over the revised plans for the visitor center," Laura informed them, passing her tablet around the table. "It maintains the rustic aesthetic while providing better facilities for the educational programs." Alex studied the plans with interest. "My professor thinks we should consider applying for that sustainable agriculture grant to expand the demonstration plots. It would align perfectly with the heritage wheat project we discussed." Emma was multitasking, simultaneously eating her dinner and updating the farm's social media accounts. "Isabella's latest post about our harvest preparations has already reached 2 million impressions, and the email list for the subscription produce boxes grew by another 1,000 names today." James listened to his family's reports with a mixture of pride and lingering disbelief. This new version of Hillcrest Valley Farm was succeeding beyond anything they could have imagined. The financial pressures that had nearly broken them were now largely resolved. Yet he couldn't help but feel occasional twinges of nostalgia for the simpler, if harder life they had left behind. "You're quiet tonight, Dad," Emma observed, finally setting down her phone. "Everything okay?" James nodded, gathering his thoughts. "Just reflecting on how much has changed. Sometimes I wonder if we've lost something in all this transformation." Laura reached over to cover his hand with hers. "We've gained far more than we've lost, James. The farm is thriving. The children have opportunities we could never have provided otherwise." "I know," James acknowledged. "And I'm grateful. Truly. It's just, sometimes I miss the days when farming was just farming, not content creation or brand building or whatever the term is now." "But isn't that what your grandfather probably said when your father started using modern equipment?" Alex pointed out reasonably. "Every generation adapts. We're just adapting to different circumstances." Emma nodded in agreement. "Besides, we're still doing real farming, Dad. We're just also helping people understand and value it. That matters too." James looked around at his family, his wise, practical wife, who had always supported his commitment to the farm despite its hardships. His son, who was now pursuing agricultural education with genuine passion rather than resignation. His daughter, who had discovered talents she might never have developed if necessity hadn't demanded it. "You're right," he conceded. "All of you. I'm proud of what we're building here. It's just sometimes a lot to absorb." After dinner, James found himself drawn to the oldest part of the barn, a section his grandfather had built with his own hands nearly a century ago. This space had been deliberately preserved in the renovation, maintained as a small museum of sorts that showcased the farm's evolution through 3 generations. Visitors found it charming. For James, it was a tangible connection to his roots. He ran his hand along the weathered wood of an antique hand plow mounted on the wall, an implement his grandfather had once used before tractors became the norm. Beside it hung black and white photographs documenting the farm's earlier days, men and women with weathered faces and strong hands, working the same land that now supported a very different type of operation. "I thought I might find you here." Laura's voice came from the doorway. She stepped inside, wrapping a light jacket around herself against the evening chill. "You always come here when you're feeling introspective." James smiled ruefully. "Am I that predictable? After 23 years of marriage?" "Yes. She joined him, looking up at the photographs. They would be proud, you know. Your father and grandfather. Proud that you found a way to keep the farm in the family when so many others couldn't. Even if that way involves Instagram posts and visitor experiences? James asked, only half joking. Laura nodded firmly. Especially then. They were innovators in their time, James. Your grandfather adopted mechanical equipment when others still used horses. Your father implemented irrigation systems that neighbors thought were unnecessary luxuries until drought proved him right. James considered this perspective. I suppose you're right. They did what was necessary to adapt. As are we, Laura affirmed. And look at the benefits. Not just financial security, but Alex's renewed enthusiasm for agriculture, Emma discovering her talents, the farm becoming a place where people can learn about sustainable farming practices. And the downside of having strangers tramping around our property several days a week? James countered, though without real heat. Laura chuckled. A small price to pay for solvency and our children's future. Besides, Emma's visitor management system keeps them contained to appropriate areas. Our private spaces remain private. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the tangible history of Hillcrest Valley Farm. Isabella called while you were with the magazine people. Laura mentioned eventually. The network is definitely interested in the documentary series. 6 episodes following a year in the life of the farm, focusing on the balance between tradition and innovation. James sighed. More cameras. More financial security, Laura corrected gently. And more opportunities to share what we do with people who might otherwise never understand where their food comes from. The educational aspect was what had ultimately reconciled James to their new reality. Yes, there was a performative element to some of what they now did. But underlying it was something valuable connecting increasingly urban populations to agricultural processes they had become disconnected from. If visitors left Hillcrest Valley with a greater appreciation for sustainable farming practices and the challenges facing family farms, wasn't that worthwhile? I'll call her back tomorrow, James decided. But I want to review the contract carefully. No dramatic recreations of farm crises or manufactured conflicts between tradition and progress. Laura smiled, already stipulated in the preliminary agreement. Emma made sure of it. James shook his head in amazement. Our daughter negotiating with television producers. Sometimes I wonder if we're still in Kansas, Dorothy. Nebraska, Laura corrected with a laugh. And yes, we're very much still here, just an evolved version. As they walked back to the farmhouse through the deepening twilight, James found his earlier disquiet gradually settling into something more like acceptance. Hillcrest Valley Farm was changing, yes, but its essence, the connection to the land, the family's stewardship, the commitment to sustainable practices remained intact. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect early autumn day. James rose at his habitual pre-dawn hour. The rhythms of farm life unchanged despite all the other transformations. Some activities remained blessedly free from documentation or visitor observation, the quiet early moments when it was just him and the awakening land. He moved through his morning chores with practiced efficiency, checking on livestock and equipment before the day's more public-facing activities would begin. As he worked, he mentally composed his response to the magazine editor's invitation to write a column. Perhaps there was value in sharing a genuine farmer's perspective with a wider audience, unfiltered by marketers or influencers. By the time the sun had fully risen, spreading golden light across the fields, James had made his peace once again with the farm's new direction. He walked toward the house for breakfast, pausing to observe a young employee, one of several local young people they'd been able to hire with their improved finances setting up for the day's visitors. The farm store would open at 10, followed by scheduled tours at regular intervals throughout the day. The demonstration kitchen where Laura now taught traditional food preservation techniques would host 2 classes. Emma would lead her increasingly popular photography workshop, teaching visitors how to capture authentic rural imagery with their phones. And throughout it all, actual farming would continue, crops tended, animals cared for, the essential work that underpinned everything else. This balance, James reflected, was perhaps the true success of their unexpected journey into the spotlight. As he approached the farmhouse, he noticed a sleek silver car pulling into the newly expanded parking area earlier than their usual visitors arrived. It took him a moment to recognize the vehicle as Isabella Valencia's rental car, the same one she had driven up to his gate that fateful day 3 months earlier. She emerged from the car looking characteristically camera-ready despite the early hour, though in more practical attire than her usual social media appearances would suggest. Spotting him, she waved and approached with the confident stride that had become familiar through her regular visits. "James! I hope you don't mind the early arrival. I wanted to catch you before the day gets busy," she called as she drew nearer. "Isabella, didn't expect you until later in the week," James replied, genuinely surprised by her appearance. Their collaboration had evolved into something like a friendship, though he still found himself occasionally disarmed by her celebrity status. Change of plans. The network executives are pushing to start filming the documentary series earlier than planned. They want to capture the full harvest season. She fell into step beside him as they walked toward the house. "But that's not why I came early. I wanted to discuss something with you and Laura privately." Her serious tone caught James's attention. "Everything all right with the partnerships?" "The business side is flourishing," Isabella assured him quickly. "The Heartland Heritage line is outperforming projections by nearly 40%. Your story resonates powerfully with consumers." They reached the porch, where Isabella paused, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. "The thing is, James, your farm's success has started a movement of sorts. Other struggling family farms have been reaching out to me, hoping for a similar transformation." James raised an eyebrow. "You can't possibly feature every family farm in America on your platforms." "No," she agreed. "But I can help create a framework for others to follow, a way for family farms to develop sustainable business models that incorporate agritourism, direct-to-consumer products, and educational components." She pulled out her tablet, showing him a professionally designed presentation. "I'm launching a foundation focused on preserving America's family farming heritage through innovation, grants, marketing support, business development resources, all targeting farms with multi-generational histories like Hillcrest Valley." James studied the material with growing interest. "This is substantial. Well beyond a few social media posts." Isabella nodded eagerly. "It's evolved into something much more meaningful than I initially imagined. And I'd like Hillcrest Valley to be the flagship example, the proof of concept that shows what's possible." They entered the kitchen, where Laura was preparing breakfast. Her surprise at seeing Isabella quickly turned to intense interest as the influencer outlined her foundation proposal. By the time Emma and Alex joined them, drawn by the unexpected visitor, the discussion had evolved into concrete planning. "So Hillcrest would serve as a training center of sorts?" Laura clarified, her practical mind already grasping the operational implications. "Other farmers would come here to learn how to implement similar models?" "Exactly," Isabella confirmed. "We'd provide stipends to cover their travel and accommodation costs, plus grants to help implement what they learn when they return to their own farms." Emma was already taking notes, her expression alight with possibilities. "We could develop specialized curriculum tracks, one for marketing and social media, another for traditional craft products, a third for educational programming." Alex nodded enthusiastically. "And my agricultural program at college might partner for the sustainable farming practices component. Several of my professors have already expressed interest in what we're doing here." James listened to his family's immediate engagement with the concept, their quick grasp of its potential not just for Hillcrest Valley, but for the broader agricultural community. This was what truly mattered, he realized, not the fame or the improved finances, but the opportunity to help preserve a way of life that was increasingly endangered. It would mean even more changes, he observed, not as an objection but simply acknowledging reality. More construction, more people, more time devoted to teaching rather than farming. "Yes," Isabella acknowledged, "but with appropriate compensation and support. The foundation is well-funded. I've secured commitments from several major corporations as part of their sustainability initiatives." Laura squeezed his hand under the table, a silent communication of her support whatever he decided. Emma and Alex watched expectantly, clearly hoping he would embrace this expanded vision. James thought of the Photographs in the barn of his grandfather and father facing the challenges of their respective eras with determination and ingenuity. What would they have done, presented with such an opportunity? The answer seemed clear. "All right," he said finally. "Let's develop this further. But with one condition." Isabella raised a questioning eyebrow. "The foundation needs to prioritize farms that are genuinely at risk of being lost," James specified. "Not just those with Instagram-worthy barns or picturesque settings. The ones where families are working themselves to exhaustion trying to hold on to their heritage, the way we were before you happened to drive by." Isabella's expression softened with unexpected emotion. "That was always the intention, James. I want to help preserve what matters: the knowledge, the connection to the land, the continuity of agricultural tradition. The aesthetics are just the hook that captures public attention." As the discussion continued, plans evolving and expanding with each person's input, James found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey of the past 3 months. What had begun with a spontaneous request from a stranger to photograph his old tractor had catalyzed a transformation far beyond financial rescue. Hillcrest Valley Farm had been put on the map. Yes, but more importantly, it had found a new purpose that honored its past while securing its future. The land that had supported 3 generations of Harpers would continue to produce food, but it would now also nurture something equally essential: understanding, appreciation, and support for the vital role of family farms in America's agricultural landscape. Later that day, as visitor hours wound down and the golden afternoon light bathed the property, James found himself once again beside the old John Deere tractor that had started it all. Isabella joined him, her professional camera in hand, but not raised a rare moment when she wasn't documenting everything around her. "I never properly thank you," James said quietly. Isabella looked surprised. "For what?" "For seeing value in this place when all I could see were its problems. For recognizing what we had here when we'd nearly lost hope." She smiled, a genuine expression rather than the camera-ready version. "I should be thanking you, James. Hillcrest Valley reminded me why I started creating content in the first place: to connect people to authentic experiences, to things that matter. Before your farm, I was burning out on luxury resort promotions and fashion partnerships that felt increasingly hollow." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as Emma led a small group of visitors toward the herb garden where Laura was demonstrating traditional drying techniques. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" Isabella asked suddenly. "The life you had before?" James considered the question honestly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "The privacy, the simplicity. But I don't miss the constant financial worry, the fear that we'd be the generation to lose the farm, the sense that everything we valued was slipping away." He gestured toward Alex, who was deep in conversation with a visiting agricultural professor, animatedly discussing soil conservation techniques. "And I don't miss seeing my son torn between his love for this land and his awareness of its limitations. Now he can embrace both the heritage and the future." Isabella nodded understanding. Balance is elusive in any endeavor. Finding it here, between tradition and innovation, between privacy and openness, between farming and education, that's the real achievement. James found himself agreeing. The balance wasn't perfect, and it required constant adjustment, but they were finding their way. Hillcrest Valley Farm had been put on the map in ways he could never have anticipated, bringing challenges he'd never imagined facing, but also opportunities that had seemed impossible just months earlier. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields his grandfather had first plowed nearly a century ago, James felt a deep sense of satisfaction settle over him. The land endured, the legacy continued, the work evolved, but remained meaningful. And in the end, that was what mattered most: not fame or fortune, but the preservation of something authentic in an increasingly artificial world. The old tractor gleamed in the fading light, a tangible link between past and present, between tradition and transformation. James ran his hand along its weathered surface, feeling the connection to all that had come before and all that was yet to come. Hillcrest Valley Farm was on the map, new, but more importantly, it had found its true place in a changing world.